Oh, that reminds me. I simply must give old Keanu a quick call.
Dude, this is a totally deep hole. Yeah! Now what?
Let me see.
Oh no.
Hello, darling. It's moi. Not quite. It's Hugo Mountbatten. Now listen here. I know you have your hands full at the moment, but I hear you've been running around LA wearing an undergarment as a shirt. How ghastly. And don't get me started on that jacket, old boy. I plan to have an awfully stern word with your stylist.
Why didn't you just come after me?
Because we're part of the A-list, darling. We stick together like two little lovely Pateks in a pod. Your stylist deserves the axe.
When I find you.
Hush, hush, little Hollywood human. Now another thing. I've heard you're casting for the new John Wick. I'd love a starring role, please. And 80 million for my likeness, and make it happen by noon. Chop chop.
We can't pull that kind of money in time.
Fine, 1:30, okay? Just in time for my 5-martini lunch.
Yes.
Splendid! Now don't forget, transfer my money to the slush fund in the Cayman Islands, okay? Toodle pip. You know, it's so true what they say. That Keanu's such a lovely chap. Okay, hi guys, and welcome to the show. I'll start off with a quick wristwatch check. Wearing the Santos Gal B. There it is. Still enamored with this piece. On the original bracelet, no strap this time. I've kept it always on the bracelet. I just love it. And that's kind of made me realize something, especially today's watch I'm going to be unboxing in just a moment, also falls in this trend of unusual or different styles of case shapes. If you are into watches, there's no way you haven't heard of the name Gerald Genta. And if you haven't, you will inevitably soon learn about this watch designer and his influence that you can still see going strong to this very day in many of the most popular watches and trends.
Gerald Genta was an Italian designer that was drawing watches and selling his sketches to different watchmaking companies. A designer that worked closely with AP for a decade.
If you watch Spot like me, then you would have undoubtedly noticed some of his most iconic creations, like the AP Royal Oak, Patek Nautilus, Amiga Constellations, and Pasha de Cartier, just to name a few, on the wrist of movie stars, music artists, celebrities, watch collectors, enthusiasts, athletes, and so on. But today I want to unbox and share the story of a watch that in many ways is arguably greater than all of these aforementioned designs, not just for how it looks, but also horologically by what powers it inside the watch. However, there's a plot twist. The best thing is, you can pick these up for under $1,000, and it just happens to coincide with the next biggest watch trend in 2023, as discussed in a previous video. Before changing the watch world forever in 1972 with the Royal Oak, which was of course the first super luxury steel sports watch, Gerald Genta had already cut his teeth designing for an equally prestigious and illustrious brand, Universal Geneve. Or is it Geneve? Or Geneva? I'm not quite sure. I'm just going to say Universal from now on. But guys, do correct me in the comments. Let's take a closer look. Today, Universal is a shadow of their former selves. And while they are still limping along with some disappointingly lackluster offerings, they are nothing like the glory days of heavyweight icons that collectors go absolutely crazy for. A few examples are the insanely cool Rattrapante or Rattrapante chronographs from World War II, the Evil Nina and Eric Clapton tri-compacts of the 60s, not to mention being worn by various presidents, movie stars and athletes. And if you're not familiar with Universal, I urge you to take a glance at their Wikipedia page and various articles you can find online. It's an utterly fascinating rabbit hole that anyone who enjoys history and horology should definitely delve into. Now, before I reveal my latest acquisition, we really need to talk about a watch that preceded it from Universal that happened to be Genta's first design for them, and it really helps us understand his design legacy as a whole. Arguably, the most well-known Universal watch of the post-war era is the Polrouter, which was originally produced in 1954, initially with the caliber 138 SS bumper movement that you might recall I actually used to own one, and the following year it was upgraded with the latest cutting edge of the time, the highly innovative caliber 215 micro rotor movement, and was produced all the way until late 1969. What really helped the Polrouter reach its iconic status was its durability under fluctuating altitudes and extreme temperature variations, thus becoming the preferred timepiece of the Scandinavian airline pilots, who frequently had to fly over the Arctic, and who the watches were originally specially made for in the first place. Its acclaim was comparable to the reputation of similar automatics of that era, like the Omega Seamaster I also own, and the Rolex Oyster Date. Naturally, Universal wanted another hit to follow the success of the Polrouter, and thus hired back Mr. Genta again. But unlike a terrible Speed sequel, Genta came up with something that, in my opinion, is one of his greatest and his most important creation, second only to the Royal Oak, perhaps. Another day, another unboxing. This is a watch, actually, I didn't intend to buy. I always say that. In all seriousness, it was one of those watches that you kind of got an eye on and you just wait until you see a really good example. In this case, this is from my good friend Kenny. Shout out to you, my friend. I've bought many Omega watches. For some reason, mostly Seamasters off him. He had one of these. I made him an offer he couldn't refuse. Go, here it is. Oh, look at that. Yes. Oh my god. Wow, look. Still has the sticker and the original buckle. Quite a nice strap. It is quite... Is that genuine crocodile? Look how thin it is. So this, ladies and gentlemen, this is the White Shadow. Original crown. The chunky, later Universal. The fat U there. This is gorgeous. So... very slender, but quite wide, quite a contemporary size, quite large really. Don't let the simplicity and minimalism of the White Shadow fool you. Unlike the Polrouter, Genta designed this watch to take full advantage of the slender micro-rotor movement. First produced in 1965, they were the thinnest automatic watches of the time, with the movement only being 2.3 millimeters tall, giving the watch a total of just a smidgen under 6 millimeters. This was achieved by, instead of having the oscillating mass mounted on top of the movement, like you see in your typical rotors, it was incorporated into the movement, thus reducing the overall height. This record was held by Universal until 1978, and during that time they expanded the Shadow series into a full line of ultra-thin dress watches, featuring both rather eccentric dial designs, but also, like my particular example, more classically styled dials with Roman numerals. After the White Shadow came various different case shapes, the Gilt Shadow, and one that I'm absolutely pining for and still on the hunt for, the Golden Shadow. Speaking of golden, there's no doubt that this Universal and its distinctive oval shape was an inspiration for the later 1968 Patek Philippe, a watch making a bit of a comeback on the wrist of Keanu Reeves recently. We are, of course, talking about the Golden Ellipse. Now, the watch world during this time was engaged in two main rivalries, technologically speaking. Who could make the thinnest watch and who could make the deepest diving watch? And this was all before the impending doom of the quartz crisis really killed off Universal. Now, one obviously to help slide under a cuff and kind of showing off watchmaking prowess, and the other more to do with robustness, case design. The utilization of the 166 and 266 micro-rotor calibers vanquished all the other contenders in this competition to be the thinnest, and many other brands soon followed with their own versions of this style of movement. Today you can see them in most of the current descendants of Genta's creations from AP and Patek and beyond. Like the later Patek Ellipse, Genta was inspired by Fibonacci's golden ratio that you can clearly see in my example, and some of the earliest Tourneau-shaped cases as well. This ancient mathematical formula is widely believed to be aesthetically pleasing and visible in nature almost everywhere. It has inspired everyone from the art of Da Vinci, Houcassé's Great Wave, Rembrandt, Mondrian, you name it. From the Hellenic architecture, and even modern stuff too, like that of Le Corbusier. The list is simply endless. And as you guys know, I'm massively into all of that arty-farty stuff, and I am reminded of this cultural legacy every time I look at it. The Renaissance mathematician Luca Pacioli renamed it La Divina Proporzione, which translated from Latin means the divine proportion. Its discrete flatness, with the lugs that gently aim the strap around the wrist, makes it one of the most comfortable watches I have ever experienced. It also has a 20mm lug width, which for a watch this modest is rather big, but actually makes it very compatible with a ton of straps, especially in this monochromatic color scheme. And obviously I love the similarity to the later Patek. That gets all the glory, unfortunately. It also has a fascinating story of design, and I read one particular article where it says, an icon that changed the watch world, and it seems to be highly revered by every blog and watch publication, which is a little unfair because I firmly believe this watch set that oval-shaped trend. But Patek, to their credit, did have to reinvent almost all of their case production methods to produce their Ellipse, a massive shift in tradition not seen since the 18th century, as the case dictated the design and not the movement. Now personally, I do not believe in coincidences. I think Patek made a flat-out homage of the White Shadow. I mean, look at them, they're so similar with the Ellipse. And the fact that they then turned around and hired Genta in 1976 to make the Nautilus for them only proves that they were aware of him and his work. I wouldn't put it past any brand, doesn't matter if you're super high-end or entry-level. Everyone's guilty of a little homaging, right? What do you guys think?
How's it going, Bill and Ted? Ted, it's us again.
Growing up watching Bill and Ted, the recently discussed G-Shock in the movie Speed, and despite a bewilderingly comical, atrocious English accent,
I've seen many strange things already.
I do adore Francis Ford Coppola's capolavoro Dracula. I have a massive respect for Keanu Reeves' work, and it's also rumoured he is almost always a thoroughly decent chap. And in a world increasingly filled with egotistical and solipsistic discourtesy, just good old-fashioned respectfulness and manners goes a very long way with me. For those who do not rate Keanu's talent, check out the highly underrated gem of a movie, Destination Wedding, alongside former Dracula co-star Winona Ryder.
The truth is, from puberty on in, we should all just be playing defense.
On into what?
Death.
Or just pay close attention to his performance in Devil's Advocate. He is utterly brilliant. It's just a little bit difficult to notice, next to Al doing his typical larger-than-life but super enjoyable portrayal of the devil. And I've got to add, he's a very stylishly dapper chap indeed. I really appreciate his sense of style. It looks effortless and always in good taste. The contrasting of watch genre and attire is nothing new. We have talked in the past about Vanessa Redgrave in Michelangelo Antonioni's pioneering first English-language movie, the 1966 classic set in swinging London called Blow Up. Her choice was a Rolex Submariner, then considered only a men's professional diver, and she wore it daringly over the cuff, setting a trend that still upsets purists to this day. The most famous example is, of course, Sean Connery and his sprezzatura of mixing a tux with a subby, mainly out of necessity during a mission, but inadvertently paving the way for generations to go beyond the typical dress watch etiquette.
This is my brother, Dr. Niles Crane, the eminent psychiatrist.
Oh, my brother is too kind. He was already eminent when my eminence was merely imminent.
Talking of style and good taste, aside from the Bond villains that wore the Patek Ellipse, it was also the choice of the character Niles Crane. And if you had not guessed from my Eames replica chair in the War Room, Frasier is one of my favourite TV shows of all time. But the newest 2023 trend is dress watches worn more casually. Well, the White Shadow is just utterly perfect in this regard, and I think really works in the same way Keanu wears his Ellipse. Now, I don't know if you guys can hear that, but the winding pitch of that rotor is higher. It sounds different to the rotors I'm used to. It behaves differently. But the fact it looks like the Patek I adore and yet has a much more horologically important proprietary movement that preceded the Patek micro rotor at a fraction of the price. I'm chuffed to bits. Absolutely pure class. It would not be until 1977 that the Patek would start introducing an automatic ellipse, with the debut of their own ultra-thin micro-rotor caliber 240. That is almost a decade later. So you can begin to see just how ahead of its time the Shadow was. And for under $1,000 on the used market, this little meraviglia punches way above its weight. As for design, it was not just influential, but timelessly classic. It did not suffer from aging as badly as Genta's much later timepieces he created under his eponymous brand. Their flamboyance and daring therefore invariably made them even more of an acquired taste. The Shadow is a product of an artist just about to peak with their greatest gift to the watch world, the subsequent Royal Oak of 1972 that he designed afterwards.
It was a very challenging decision to make. The company was in a difficult situation because of this crisis. Any wrong move could have killed it. Even if it was perceived as being something completely against the rules of haute horlogerie, it was completely coherent with what we stand for.
But at the same time, it's not playing it too safe like his earlier, more conventional work, the Pole Router, or his 1959 Omega Constellation, and even my own very obscure pre-Royal Oak AP, that were all far more conservative. But put a White Shadow next to a Patek Nautilus, and you can even see the family resemblance. But unlike what his 1970s icons have become today, the Shadow comes from an age when class was about understated refinement and substance, not this vapid, flexing, value-obsessed TikTok trashiness and the disposable watch culture we unfortunately see today. With my recent acquisition of a Panerai, the absolute antithesis of this watch, I'm really starting to enjoy these extremes in styles and shapes. The Shadow has a beguiling sense of sophistication, a fun contrast to the bold, masculine, unforgiving brutishness of the Luminor and its charms. So far I'm connecting to it much more than the Royal Oak I used to own and the Pole Router. And anyway, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Please don't forget to like this video, very important indeed, especially if you want to support more free and independent content like this. Thank you for watching, onwards and upwards, and I'll catch you in the next one. Ciao.